Hey there, welcome to the garden. Today I wanted to come out and chat quickly about growing dahlias in containers. So if you are a container gardener like me, this year I'm gardening almost completely in containers, but if you also just have containers, you like to have a couple pots of plants around and you're thinking about maybe adding some dahlias into a container space, I just wanted to chat through some of my thoughts on this. So this was my first year really of growing a lot of dahlias in containers, and I have to say I have been so thrilled with how well they have done. I absolutely love dahlias. Dahlias are just some of the most gorgeous flowers, I think personally, that there are. I just always think dahlias are beautiful, and a lot of times you see like the big dinner plate dahlias, maybe all the tubers, and you know, maybe you've wondered if you could do them in containers, and I'm happy to say that yes, you can. I have about 5 tips of what I have found that works for growing them in containers, but they're just absolutely beautiful, and they come in so many fun shapes and sizes and colors, and that's kind of like one of the things that I love most about dahlias, because no matter what your garden looks like, you can probably find a dahlia that fits. So let's take a look at the ones that I have in the garden right now. I have 3 different dahlias all growing in containers, and then I'll talk through kind of like my five biggest tips, I guess, for how to be successful growing these in a container garden. This first one is absolutely adorable. Isn't this guy so cute? Just one of these really fun little more compact dahlia varieties. You will find that some of them are really big. They can be really tall, but there's also some really cute compact styles, and this one is definitely one of those, and they just have the sweetest little flowers. I can't remember, I've lost the plant tag now on what this specific variety is, but you'll see a lot that look kind of like these in your garden centers, and they're perfect. I think that you could mix them into a container with a lot of other flowers, but I also think they're just perfect kind of the way I have it here, where it's just like one single plant in a container. They're just so full and bushy, and as you can tell, there's just buds everywhere. They just put on tons and tons of blooms, and they're so cute as like a singular little plant. Just adorable and so sweet in the garden. So I've been really enjoying this guy. I think it's just absolutely adorable. Now, if you want to do like more of a combination of plants, I think some of maybe the taller dahlias are a perfect like centerpiece plant. So this is the Mystic Illusion Dahlia, which has to be one of my absolute favorites. I've talked a lot about it because it's got this beautiful dark foliage, so it's a really kind of pretty element to add some interest to the garden. It's just a little bit different. Your typical dahlia is going to have that green foliage. This has that beautiful, it's just like the most rich, lovely color. And it looks so pretty mixed in with other things. You can, grow these in ground if you want, but they are doing beautifully in containers. So I've got this one in a nice big container. There's a sweet potato in there. There's some little zinnias. There's some salvia, and it's just so happy. It's doing absolutely beautiful and just looking so great. And isn't that stunning? Oh, the bees also adore this one. Like, this has to be one of the big pollinator favorites, and I actually have it over here in my like trough raised beds. So these trough planters, technically they're raised bed size. It's the 2x6 trough, but it's actually fully contained underneath, so it is definitely a full container. And as you can see, the Mystic Illusion Dahlia is doing beautifully in here too. Just as well, it's got more root space in this sort of raised bed container, but honestly they're both doing equally well. I've been really happy with both the smaller container growing this and in this bigger container here, doing absolutely beautiful in both. And like you can see, it's just like such a nice element because it's got such good contrast, and that yellow is so perfect when you add with any like darker colored flowers. It's just a beautiful, stunning mix. So this is another way to grow a dahlia like in a big container. I got another one here, which again, I'm so embarrassed, I don't remember the name of this because I also got rid of the plant tag, but this one I actually started from a tuber. So I did the other two in like, I just bought them as starts from the garden center, but this plant I got as a tuber and is one of the bigger, like big style. This is almost like probably around over 3 feet tall plant. growing in a container, started from a tuber, doing beautifully. This is a very, like a bigger container, I would say. This is a bigger space, another one of these like raised bed containers, but fully enclosed, and honestly not a ton of soil because I didn't fill the containers or the raised beds up all the way, which I do kind of regret, but it has not been an issue for the dahlia. This thing is packed in here. You can see it's next to a bunch of tomatoes. There's a pepper plant in here. There's some zinnias behind it. There's squash. I mean, it's really growing in a pretty jam-packed area, and it's doing really, really beautifully. So absolutely gorgeous. And just look at the center of this flower and covered in buds. So happy. So beautiful. Right, so let's talk about how to kind of make this successful. I even wrote down some notes for myself so that I could make sure I didn't forget. So as I mentioned, I have these growing in a few different size containers, and I think that's one of the things with any container gardening that really can make a difference. So you want to find the right size container. For that little style dahlia, the first one I showed you, it's in about an 8-inch container, a nice deep terracotta pot, and that's because it's such a petite plant, that's really a totally fine size container. But the Mystic Illusion dahlia that I have planted up with some other things, that's in a full like 20-inch diameter container. And then of course we've got the big planter like raised bed containers that are also doing well and have like the big tuber dahlia. So I would say in general, the bigger container that you have, kind of like the better, to be honest. In most container gardening settings, if they can have more soil reservoir, it works really well. But I would just say, you know, anything, I would probably go 10-inch and up for a single dahlia would probably be like a good rule of thumb or a good place to start experimenting with. And then I was really happy to see that kind of in those big planter style containers, perfect place to put in like a tuber dahlia or something like that. It's done really, really well for me. Of course, once you've got it in the right container, use nice good potting mix, nothing like no garden soil, good draining potting mix, all the principles for container planting that you would typically follow, and fertilize. So all of my dahlias here, they are on a fertilizer schedule. They get a water soluble fertilizer once a week, and I have been very, very diligent on making sure that I am getting out here and giving them that, and that makes a really big, with all container gardening, that fertilizing makes a really, really big difference. Another thing is doing the kind of maintenance, like as you can see, they are going to get the spent flowers, and staying on top of deadheading is going to keep your dahlias blooming so that you get this nice show. You do want to just stay on top of kind of grooming and deadheading, and also to keep them healthy. I have been really glad this year I haven't had to deal with any spider bites or any issues on my dahlias, but you do sometimes run into those kind of pest problems. So also like deadheading, treating for pests, kind of those normal sort of maintenance chores are going to be really important to keep your dahlias happy. And when you're watering, make sure you're watering right at the base of the plant, that you're not spilling water all over the leaves, and that'll help to keep down some of those like pest issues and powdery mildew issues. But basically we just want to get rid of all these spent leaves, spent flowers, make sure we're taking the water down at the base, and we're not adding to any fungus or pest issues on your dahlias in containers. Then you want to think about your sun requirements. So most of the dahlias that I have found are going to want pretty full sun, but they can handle a tiny bit of part shade. So I do have like the one in this kind of back raised bed over here, this big orange one, and my little guy up front. They're in about part shade because they really get mostly afternoon sun. We have a really intense afternoon sun, so it does a lot of good work for the plants. It's a lot for them to handle. They get kind of morning shade and afternoon sun, and they've been doing really well. But I would say that for the most part, if you've got a nice sunny spot, that's going to really help your dahlias in containers, and just make sure that they're not totally shaded out. But they will fight for it, and they will try to make it work. So you can get away with a tiny bit of shade usually, just as long as they're at least getting some good sun, maybe that like 6-hour rule at least. And your plant tags too, you know, the specific variety will kind of give you a little bit more information on that. But that's one that if you want to have blooms on your dahlias, you want to keep them happy, that's going to be important. And the last thing is to pair them with plants that are going to be good matches for them. So all of my dahlias, they are pretty packed in. They're planted around a lot of other things, but they're not really planted next to anything that's a super intense root system. So dahlias do have tubers, and they spread out with those tubers rather than going down, they spread out. So I have been kind of planting things with sort of lighter root systems. The tomato plants aren't too crazy. The zinnias that are next to them aren't doing too much. Now, I do have this one up front here that is next to a sweet potato vine. So, you know, all bets are kind of off with this guy, but it's doing really, really well. And at least it has, going back to our first tip, a big enough container that there's actually room for them to grow happily together. And that's been doing really well. And it's been happy all season. So if you were contemplating whether or not to add dahlias to your container garden, my advice is go ahead and give it a try. See if you can figure it out. Of course, every garden is a little different, and some things that work and some gardens don't. I have had issues in my past garden with dahlias and having a lot of pests on them, but this year the pests have not been bugging the dahlias, and I have been so happy, and I have been having so much fun having them in the container garden. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.